صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله يا مظلوم يا غريب كربلاء لعن الله الظالمين لكم يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. صلوات
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. صلى الله على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Before we begin the lecture, brothers and sisters, can we please recite the Fatiha for our marhumin after Salat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. For the last few days, we have been discussing the existence of God and the concept of, the concept of a godless world that we live in. And we discussed that this was due to modernity, materialism, and the emergence of scientism, people moving away from religion because religion was not providing solutions for people anymore. And so we moved away from God and we moved towards the material. And one of the pegs of modernity, one of the focal points of our day and age is, and I'm sure we've all heard of this and we studied it in school, the theory of evolution, which is taught to us in school not as a theory but as fact. Evolution, just to summarize, is about over 100 years ago, Charles Darwin, he gave us a comprehensive explanation about this theory which had existed before him, and he expanded on it a little bit. And so this theory now prevails among most learned people, most people of science, and most professors at universities. And if you were to deny this theory, you would be classified as insane in this day and age. And there are many proofs and fossils that would say that we have evolved from something. Before this theory prevailed in the thoughts and ideologies of people, thank you.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Before this theory prevailed, people would see animals and human beings as different. But now, it's not the case. Humans and animals are classed in the same bracket, if you will. And this is why we should discuss this. I want to discuss it, not because it has anything to do with God, because it doesn't. Whether the theory of evolution is true in the way they explain it or it isn't, it has no difference when it comes to the existence of God. This is not a discussion about God's existence. It's not an issue of, is it evolution or is it God's creation? That's not the issue. But Richard Dawkins believes that it's either natural laws or God. If it's God, you can't have natural laws. And if it's natural laws, you can't have God. But we as Muslims, we don't have that problem. That's his confusion and that's his problem. We don't believe that. We believe God works through natural laws. So this is not an issue for us. But because we are discussing modernity, it's fitting that we discuss this topic. And so, in a nutshell, evolution is when a species produces more offspring then can possibly survive. And these individuals have different traits and characteristics, they differ, and they have to compete for food. And the ones with better traits and better characteristics and stronger traits, they're the ones that survive and outlive the others. The others die out. And so they reproduce. And this is called natural selection. That's what they call it. And ultimately, we all go back to the same cell or the same prototype animal, that we all have a common ancestor. It's not that we go back to apes or monkeys or anything like that. That's not what it is. People get mixed up and think that evolution means that we come from apes. So there's no one that even says that. Only an ignorant person would say that, someone who doesn't know what they're talking about. We all have a common ancestor. That's the theory. That's what's really going on. Now, if this theory does hold, Shahid Mutahhari says that this does not mean there is no design. In fact, this would be seen as a proof of design itself. And Sheikh Nasir Makarim Shirazi, Marja' Taqleed in Iran, he says that evolution, if it is true, it is only a scientific manifestation of the law of cause and effect that we have been discussing. It has nothing to do with God being there or not being there. And so it's impossible to disprove God. No one can disprove God's existence. Even the most hardcore atheists could not disprove God's existence. They can't. Really, that means everyone's agnostic in a way. There can't be a true atheist who has found a way to disprove God. But this is what these ulama of Islam have said in any case, that this is not an issue of God's existence or not. Even the Pope says that evolution relies on creation to evolve from. It needs something to evolve from. So something has to be originated for that. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Muslims don't have a problem like the Christians do. Because if the Bible was to be taken literally, and many Christians do believe that the earth is only 6,000 years old, and some Christians don't believe that, they don't take it literally. But in any case, we don't have that problem. Because within the Quran, one day can be 1,000 days or it can be 50,000 days. Right? Sorry, 1,000 years or 50,000 years. One day. So God knows how long, because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says He created the earth in 6 days, He said kun fayakun, right? But it took 6 days, but we don't know how long those 6 days are. These are not literal meanings, right? So we don't have a problem with the earth being very old. That's not a problem to do with the Islamic narrative. So we're fine with that. We don't have the same problem as the Christians do. So now they have found, for example, bones of Native Americans that are 15,000 years old. Aboriginals, their bones 20,000 years old. Recently they found a cave in Paris, 30,000 years old. So these things are there. They have been scientifically proven, and they have nothing against Islam, and Islam has nothing against them. Now the theory of evolution comes down to a micro and macro evolution. Okay? Let me explain what these terms mean. A micro evolution is the evolution of a species within the same species. And a macro evolution is from species to different species. So if it's a micro evolution, that's been proven as well. So we can see the lifespan of the fly or a lizard, for example, because they have shorter lifespans. The first generation of the fly will be different to the 50th generation of the fly if they are within different circumstances and situations and atmospheres. They'll be different. They might develop new things on their bodies to adapt to their surroundings, right? New traits. There's no problem, that's been proven. That's fine. The question comes to macroevolution. This is where it really is. Can a species evolve over several million years into another species? And that's the problem that we are facing here. Now, when it comes to the Islamic narrative, and what Islamic scholars say, the conclusions, there isn't 100% set opinion on the matter. There are actually varying different opinions. Because as I said, we have the earth being that old, we have no problem with it. And right now, just to clarify once again, that Charles Darwin does not say that there is no God himself. Even himself, he doesn't say there is no God. He was perplexed by a higher power, actually. Charles Darwin himself was perplexed by a higher power. So when people try to show Charles Darwin as an atheist himself, that is also an act to try to confuse us. That's not the case. And once again, that it's nothing to do with apes and monkeys. But there are Islamic scholars who believe in the theory of evolution, not 100% the way it is, but they try to correlate evolution with the Islamic narrative. So a scholar by the name of Yadullah Sahibi, he has a book called The Creation of Man. In this book, he has incorporated the Islamic narrative of Adam and Eve with evolution. And this is really the problem for us. Because at school, we are taught about evolution. And at the mosque and at home, we're taught about Adam and Eve. And so, we're at a crossroads. How do we make peace with this? What do we say about this? Do they go together or don't they? Well, Yadullah Sahibi believes they do, and they can. Whereas other scholars, like Allama Tabatabai, believes no, this is not the case. Even if there is evolution, that Nabi Adam alayhi salam was a direct creation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That doesn't negate that there were other creatures on the earth at the time, but Nabi Adam himself, so our grandfather, this insan, in the form that we are in, he was a direct creation from Allah. So we're going to discuss the Islamic views on pro-evolution and the Islamic views on procreation, and then we'll discuss the story of the origin of the insan. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So the first thing is, for the advocates of evolution, those Islamic scholars who believe in evolution, they will say that when we say kun fayakun, does that mean that it just pops into existence instantly? Is this how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has worked on earth? Or do we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no, He works through laws and processes and gradually creates? That kun fayakun is an amr, but that it takes time. This is the way in which He wants to create. And the example of the baby in the womb is given. So kun fayakun. But it takes 9 months for the baby, for the fetus to grow, and for the woman to give birth. So it's a gradual process that they're going through. So this is the example that's given, that everything is through processes, and then they bring in the Quranic ayahs to back this up. So وَقَدْ خَلَقَكُمْ أَطْوَارًا. He has created you in stages. يَزِيدُ فِي الْخَلْقِ مَا يَشَاءُ. So He increases in creation whatever He wills. بَلْ هُمْ فِي لَبْسٍ مِنْ خَلْقٍ جَدِيدٍ. They're in confusion over a new creation. See, all these ayahs, they're saying points to something like this, like why not? He creates مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. He can create what you don't know. There is no problem against this. What if, for example, Adam was a mutation? For example, some actually believe this. In any case, these ayat, they say, would point to the fact that evolution and the Islamic narrative can be correlated, and that there is no problem with it and nothing against it. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. A recent study in the Scientific American in 2009 showed that 99% of the human DNA was shared with chimpanzees. So out of the 3 billion letters that make up the human genome, only 15 million of those letters were different than chimpanzees. Right? So it's 1% different than chimpanzees when it comes to the DNA. If you want, our faraway cousins. So what is that 1% difference? Why are we humans and why are they chimpanzees? What was the difference? And then they say, here is the difference. So for those advocates of pro-evolution, aside from the thought that I mentioned about Adam being a mutation, that's a very, very, very rare opinion and it's sidelined. But those who use those ayat, وَقَدْ خَلَقَكُمْ أَطْوَارًا, and all the ayat that I mentioned, They will say there's one difference. That 1% difference. What is it? ثُمَّ أَنْشَأْنَاهُ خَلْقًا جَدِيدًا ثُمَّ أَنْشَأْنَاهُ خَلْقًا آخَرَ. Then we made him a new creation. What is that new creation? So they say for all those things there was evolution, but then we made him a new creation. ثُمَّ أَنْشَأْنَاهُ خَلْقًا آخَرَ. This 1% comes to وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي. And I breathed into him from my spirit. That makes everything different. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala breathed into the spirit, that created the human being with the human consciousness that made it differ. Those 15 million letters, for example, now differed than those of the chimpanzee, and gave us this consciousness that sets us apart from these animals. So this is the view of those Islamic scholars who believe in pro-evolution. What is the view of those Islamic scholars who believe in procreation? They say that this is not the case. That even if there were other creatures on earth, and perhaps there would be no problem. Nabi Adam alayhi salam himself was a direct creation. You see, even with the pro-evolution Islamic scholars, they don't describe how Adam came into being. The ayah is there, but how? When? When did Adam come into being from, did he have a father? It's not stated. It's vague. So there isn't a way where we can imagine it 1, 2, 3. It's like 1, 3, and 2 is skipped. And so the Islamic scholars, they say that the verses of the Quran, they point to Adam being a direct creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they point to the story of when the Christians of Najran came to debate, and they use the fact that Nabi Isa alayhi salam does not have a father. So because Nabi Isa alayhi salam does not have a father, they said he is the son of God. And so the ayah was revealed, Inna mathala Isa عند الله كمثل آدم خلقه من تراب ثم قال له كن فيكون. So it says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He sees the example of Nabi Isa, Jesus, the same as that of Nabi Adam alayhi salam. He said He created him from soil, from dust, from turab. And He said to him, kun fayakun. So what does that mean? Why am I bringing this up? Well, if Jesus doesn't have a father, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is bringing Adam to it. So Adam doesn't have a father. I created them both from soil. So they use this as a proof to show it was a direct creation. Jesus was a direct creation, and so was Nabi Adam alayhi salam. Well, Jesus was a creation that was within a fetus of a womb. Was a fetus within a womb. But Nabi Adam himself was a direct creation from turab. Then He said to him, be, and it is. And they were. And so they use this. So Alamat Tabatabai is also of this view. There's also this ayah, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وبدأ خلق الإنسان من طين. So He started the creation of the human being from teen, from soil. Later on, sperm was used for the reproduction of the offspring. But initially, it was a direct creation. Then you have all these narrations from the Imams. So Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he says that you think that you are the only people of humanity that Allah has created? No, He has created thousands before you. There have been 1,000 Adams before you. And you are the last of those Adams. Imam Baqir alayhi salam also has one that says 1,000,000 Adams before you, and 1,000,000 worlds before your world. So when we think that we're the only ones, this has happened many times over and over again. There have been many mankinds. So there's no problem for us to think that there were other types of beings on this earth, or perhaps other earths. The Imams are saying it. In the Quran, we cannot see this. In the Quran, we're not told about this. But in the narrations, we are told about this. There's another narration where Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he says that, do you think that after the day of resurrection, there will be no one left to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That this won't happen. This is not the case. Allah will create a new creation, not from the marriage of male and female, and they will glorify and worship God. So this carries on even after our story. After the story of Adam, According to this narration, this carries on. According to the other narration, we are the last of 1,000,000 Adams. When I say 1,000,000 Adams, I'm talking about races. I'm talking about species, not Prophet Adams. Right? Adam is the symbol of our species, of the human race. So you see, our narrations don't have a problem with this at all. But they look to Nabi Adam alayhi salam as being a direct creation, as it says in the Quran. Saying all of this, these are the Islamic perspectives on evolution. We do have to come to evolution, and I just want to point out a few problems with it, because it is the peg of modernity. There are a few problems with evolution. Now, I may get attacked for saying this if anyone finds it online, but in any case, I should. Right now, evolution is not like a theory like anything else. Like, if there was a theory at universities that professors disagreed with, like quantum mechanics or anything else, the string theory in physics, these things, if they have a different opinion, that's okay, you have a difference of opinion. But if you have a different opinion when it comes to the theory of evolution, you're insane. You are demoted, fired. Contemporaries would not respect you. Because how could you deny the theory of evolution? It is the peg of modernity, and I keep saying that because if it was to fall, the whole of the tent would fall. And they don't want it to fall, and it keeps changing over time. It changes. When there are things that are found to be inconsistent, it changes once again. So this is something to take into consideration. There is still a biological proof against it. In terms of Charles Darwin, when he found like a pre-evolved fish and a post-evolved fish, and there was no middle point connection between the pre-evolved animal and the post-evolved animal, he said that those fossils would be found gradually over time, and they haven't been found yet, for example. Whereas the link between them, it hasn't been found. Fossils of a very distant animal have been found, and an animal perhaps that had evolved from it, but within the middle, it hasn't been found yet. And who knows if it ever will. Perhaps it will, who knows. It's not there yet. See, that's one of the problems. And if you think about it, like Sayyid Hussain Makke, an Islamic professor at George Washington University, he says that it's preposterous to think of the eye being created by evolution. As in, how could a blind being in the mud that couldn't see rearrange the molecules in the eye and then somehow see? Like, where did that start? How does that adapt exactly? How do you adapt into having sight? So, for example, he's one of the people who sternly stand against evolution. There's another problem with it, the mathematical problem of it. In maths, there is the theory of information, and this is perhaps one of the strongest points against evolution. The theory of information is that you cannot take more out of box A than what you put into it. So whatever is in this cup, this is as much as is going to be taken out of it. I cannot take 2 liters out of this cup because there aren't 2 liters of water inside it, right? I can only take this much. So a cell is basically like a box. It has information in it. So how will you take more information out of it than is within it? That's another point that they use against evolution. And finally, and this point is very important, and this is not something to disprove evolution, but is something that we should consider after what evolution has done to our world and made us move away from God, because it has made a movement away from God and religion. And it has made a movement to make us more racist towards each other. It has created racism within us to our own species. So if you go to the Natural History Museum in New York, you would see all these ancient animals. You see a mammoth, and then you would see a native human being, right? It's still a human being, but it's native. So the white man is like the evolved version of this native human being. Okay? The white man is the symbol of progression and evolution within humanity. So the French white man is evolved from the Bulgarian white man because he's a Western European. Although they're both white and they're both Christians, let alone the white man compared to an African or Asian, God forbid. Okay, so He has created this, and people don't want to admit this, that's fine, but we can see it happening in our daily, we can see it every single day. It's alive now more than ever. It hasn't stopped. Lynching hasn't stopped. It still happens, but with people with badges. People with badges lynch people of darker skin. It still happens. But it's okay. The racism is still very alive. It's very well. And if you go to the deep root of the issue, it's because we are evolved from that. Okay, so this is another problem with it. Again, I'm not anyone who's an expert in this field of biology or evolution. I am giving you the Islamic perspectives on the issue and these problems which some scholars have pointed out. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now, I want to touch on a point. As I said, the theory of evolution does not go against the Islamic narrative, but even if it did, then there's a choice that you must make. Now it doesn't, but if it did, for future references, for when something goes against the Islamic narrative, and you feel like which side do I choose, right? Remember we talked about epistemology, about which route of knowledge we take. This is an epistemological approach. Which form of knowledge would you take? Science or revelation if they were to bump heads? If they were to bump heads, which form of knowledge would I choose? And this is where you realize your priorities in life. As in which one would you go for? You trust science more than God, perhaps? So science, again, you have to realize that it's based on an injunction. It's based on a limited number of observations. So when I see one light brown deer, and I see another light brown deer, and I see 1,000 light brown deers, I draw up the conclusion. I'm like, the next one will be, what would the next one be? Light brown deer. But what if it's a dark brown deer? I'm wrong. And dark brown deers exist, right? Okay, well, 1,000 light brown deers just came in a row. But there's a chance that I'm wrong because it's based on a limited number of observations. It's an injunction. It's not an infinite number of observations. It's always a sample. And so there's always a chance that it can be wrong. And science has brought us so much technology and architecture and has progressed the human species so much. But at the same time, it keeps changing. It keeps changing. In the 1940s, Bertrand Russell said that there was no beginning to the universe. And on a radio podcast, he said, it's a fact. Just deal with it. And that's been disproven now. Right? So you have to make a decision, even if you come across things that may bump heads with the Islamic narrative. Would you take the pixel or the picture? The owner of the picture, the painter's perspective. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who knows everything, who tells you it's this way, or these people who have done so much for humanity, but at the same time can still be wrong. Especially if they're going against something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said. And this has not been the case ever in history. Science has not been able to disprove anything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said. And if evolution they believe is that, then it isn't. We just show it very well. It's just the way in which Allah could be creating things through an intelligent natural selection, not a random one. Granted that Nabi Adam alayhi salam is a direct creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when a letter was sent to one of the Islamic scholars saying, where is God? Right? The audacity. Where is God? And then the scholar sent back, you don't even know where you are. You don't know where you are in the universe. We don't have the coordinates of where the earth is in the universe. You want to know where God is? I mean, this is the audacity of the human being. You don't even know where you are. We don't know. A long time ago, they used to think that the earth was the center of the universe, and we know that that's nowhere near true. You know, we're just a random planet on a random galaxy in a random So we don't even know where we are. So science itself still has so much to know. There's so much we don't know. And inshallah we can progress with that. And as I said yesterday, Islamic scientists progress to humanity as well. They don't go against each other. So this is something that we should take into consideration, the epistemological approach of what we take. Revelation or science, if they were to bump heads at any time. Now, I wanted to explain the story of the origin of the human being. If we are to believe that Nabi Adam a.s. is the direct creation of Allah, then how did He create him? How did He create Adam a.s.? Eons had passed. The earth was there with its atmosphere and all these animals and water. And there were jinn that would worship Allah. There were winged creatures, there were angels that would worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there were these humanoid type creatures that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created. They were called the Nasnas. These are narrations from Bihar al-Anwar. The stories from Bihar al-Anwar. The narrations of the Imams. And how they explain creation. And the Nasnas were there and all these things worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But at one point, these Nasnas and a group from the jinn, they rebelled against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a divine story. So try not to think of it as we live on this earth. They rebelled against Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had let them do that for millennia. He let them rebel. And at one point the angels saw what has been happening and they flipped. They couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe that people would disobey Allah and this nas were disobeying and these jinn were disobeying God. They couldn't handle it. Because the angel is only intellect. The angels don't have desire. So they can't comprehend how something can disobey God. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided, إِنِّي جَاعَلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. I am creating upon the earth my vicegerent, my khalifa, my proof and witness against the creatures to rule over this kingdom. This human being who is going to have a greater intellect and consciousness. Right? We are the only animals, if you want to call us animals, we are the only animals that can consciously reflect and wonder about life after death and where we were before we were born. Normal animals can't do that. Right? He was going to create this creature. And the angels were surprised and they were scared because they had seen what has been happening. And so they said, will you place on the earth a creature which creates mischief and sheds blood? And Alamat Watabai in Tafsir al-Mizan points out that this shows that there have been other creatures before us which have caused bloodshed and mischief for them to say that. So again, if you want to correlate that with evolution, you can. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to them, إِنِّي أَعْلَمُ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. I know what you don't know. The narrations go on to explain that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said He was going to create from this being prophets and imams. And these beings were going to tell the humans not to sin against Allah. And if they were to sin, they would be grouped with the sinful. And the Nasnas were wiped out. And the jinn were moved away. And a veil was created between the human beings and the jinn. So that the jinn cannot befriend or interact with these new beings. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala began to create this new being. He decided that this being was going to be of the material world, and so it should be made out of material. So He sent down Jibreel to go and collect the dust from the earth and tell the earth that we are going to create this new human being who has free will. And if it chooses, it will worship me. And if it chooses not to, it will disobey me. And it will be rewarded based on what it chooses. And the earth begged for this new being not to be created from its material. It doesn't want this new being to be created from its dust and then go on to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then go on to the hellfire. I don't want that being to come from me. And so it begged. It begged Jibreel God forbid that you take my dust. And so Jibreel left it and went back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah sent down Mikael, the angel Mikael, and the earth pleading. Again, this is a metaphysical story. Everything is alive, as we mentioned. Everything glorifies the name of Allah. The earth is alive, and the earth told Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and is telling Mikael, it's begging, please don't take my dust and create this being from my dust that can disobey God. So Mikael came back, Israfil came and he went back. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala went to the angel called Azrael. And he told Azrael, go down and take the dust. And the earth told Azrael, God forbid that you take my dust. And Azrael told the earth, God forbid that I return to Allah without having fulfilled my mission. And so it took the dust. It took different types of colors. Red, black, white, brown, and different temperaments. Rocky, salty, sweet, soft. And it returned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why Allah, when He came to Azrael, and he saw that Azrael brought back the dust, He said, because you have gone and seized the dust from the earth, from now on you will be the one who will seize the souls of this new being. And so Malakul Maut was born. That's how Azrael became Malakul Maut. That's how he became Angel of Death. Because he is the one who collected the dust. And so the angels mixed this dust, this turab, ard, soil, with water. And it created this dark, foul smelling clay. And the dark, foul smelling clay was, the stones were removed from it, so it became a soft clay. It became a pure, homogeneous extract of clay. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for 40 years, He kneaded it, and He made it a sticky form of clay, and He let it cure for 40 years. And these years, we don't know how many years they are in our world. For 40 years, let it cure. And then, at that time, it was ready to be fashioned. When the Quran said masnoon, now it was ready to be fashioned. And He fashioned it into this hollow figure that would stand upright. And He left it for another 40 years to dry, this hollow figure. And now this hollow figure, after 40 years, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ صَلْصَالٍ كَالْفَخَّارِ in Surah Al-Rahman. He created him from clay, like fine pottery, right? It's like pottery the way He made it. So this being was made into a hollow statue now, after 40 years. So He kneaded it for 40 years, let it cure, then masnoon, fashioned it. And at that point, وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي, He breathed into it from His spirit. And so Adam was born, alayhi salam. And Adam was taught all the names, was taught knowledge. And now this new human being with this intellect that was directly created was sent down to earth. Now the story of creation goes on, inshallah we can discuss that another time. But before I end the lecture, I wanted to touch upon the point of what is an insan. Did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create insan? That's what He says. He calls us insan. Sometimes we are referred to in the Quran as bashar, sometimes as insan. Now the mammals, they have fur. The birds have feathers. The human beings, we have skin. Skin. In Arabic, bashara is skin. And that's where bashar comes from. When we're called bashar, when someone says bashar, it means he's just a man. Bashar is man because of the skin. Bashar is that quality which separates us from the other animals. So fur, feathers, skin, bashar, bashara. And when they would say to the prophets, you're a bashar just like us, right? They are meaning you're a man just like us. But this is something anjad that we should think about. We share bashariya with each other. We all have skin. We're men, we're women, we have bashar. But we don't share insaniya. Right? We don't share humanity within all of us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of His generosity, He called us insan. In truth, Insan, humanity, is not something we're born with. Some people are born with more values than others. Sometimes that happens. But this insaniya is something to be gained and work towards. Humanity isn't just there for you. You have to become a human. Because most of us act just like animals. Most people on this earth, there is no difference. One Islamic scholar compares it to, he said, if you can imagine a dog that is standing on 2 legs instead of 4 legs and is speaking with language, that's the state of most human beings today. We have narrations that say the angels were born with just intellect. And the animals were born with desire only, no intellect. So the animal only does what its desire tells it. It sleeps, it eats, it mates. Whereas the angel cannot even comprehend someone disobeying Allah. Whereas this creation, this Adam, he has intellect and he has desire. We have both. We have the animal side and we have the human side. And if you allow your desire to overtake your intellect, the Imam says, then you are lower than the animal. Because the animal didn't have the intellect to help it. You had the intellect and you still chose desire. Yet, if you are able to allow your intellect to control your desire, then you're higher than an angel. Because that angel didn't have to battle within like we battle within. When we battle within, we're using our intellect and our aql. The aql is that which holds you back and prevents you. Stops us from disobeying God. So we have aql and we have desire. If we are able to let the aql reign supreme over our being, then we are even higher than an angel. Look at our potential. We are higher than Jibreel. Or we could be lower than a dog. And the choice is ours. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Imam al-Hussain has left Medina for Mecca. He stays inside Mecca for 4 months. The people come and visit him. He decides that he will make the Hajj. He puts on the clothes of Ihram. But he finds out Yazid has sent those men to assassinate him. He doesn't want the sanctity of Mecca to have bloodshed. And so he decides that he will leave Mecca. He knew exactly what he was going towards. The people of Kufa were sending him letters. He knew of the people of Kufa. He knew how they had treated his father. But as the Imam, he couldn't help but to accept to guide them. As the Imam went to gather his family, everyone came to the horses. Abu Fadil calls to Sayyida Zainab. He helps her to get onto the horse. Sayyida Zainab is leaving Mecca with pride. Her brothers are with her. Abu Fadil protects her with his shadows. For all of their lives, no one would even see the shadow of Sayyida Zainab. Now she leaves Mecca. But how is this seen in contrast to the day of Ashura, when Sayyida Zainab is left alone with no protector, no one to help her and the children onto the horses, as their arms are tied together. Now Sayyida Zainab is the one lifting the children to the horses. She says to her sister Kulthum, light of my eye, let me help you up on the horse. Kulthum says to Zainab, but if I go up on the horse, who will help you? Sayyida Zainab turns to the river. We all know where she's turning to. Rahim Allah man nada wa Abbasa wa Abbasa, everyone, wa Abbasa wa Abbasa. As if she turns to the riverbed to wonder, where are you, my brother? But with which hands can he lift you up onto those, Ya Zainab? With which hands, laying down hundreds of meters from each other, with a body mutilated into pieces? Ya Abu Fadil, the night has come without you. Ya Abu Fadil, how the children miss you. Ya Abu Fadil, my loneliness, if only you knew. Ya Abu Fadil, your sister is prisoner now. Ya Abu Fadil, if only you could see how. Ya Abu Fadil, how your name the children shout. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. La'ana Allah al-zalimin ila yawm al-qiyamah. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.